Hello and welcome. I am so excited for today and tomorrow, where we've got the Voices of Strength Summit. Why am I so excited? Because I want to share stories and voices with you of 17 incredible men who dared to find their courage, who dared to be vulnerable, who dared to use that vulnerability to build strength, and then to share their voice and story with you in our wonderful book Voices of Strength that we launched earlier on in the year. And I've got an amazing guest to open up our summit. So let me just read his quote. Probably won't do it as good as him, but never mind. Let's have a go. If we are serious in our quest to rediscover humanity at its best, then our job is to walk the talk today and every day, doing our best to figure out what the world is trying to be, and then help the world be that, be better, and be even more. So Dennis is the founder and chief reimaginator of 360 Degree Nation, encompassing a wide range of multimedia enterprises, including Biz Catalyst 360 Degrees, the award-winning Global Media Digest, 360 Degree Nation Studios, and Good Works 360 Degrees. So welcome, Dennis, to our summit. It is so wonderful having you here. And today you are talking about we're all homeless.
Yes.
And it's time to change the narrative. What an amazing title. So I'm just going to hand the reins over to you and please share all your wonderful jewels of wisdom with us and let us into the secret of why you believe we are all homeless.
Brenda, thank you for such a thoughtful introduction. You know, with what's going on in the world, particularly lately, no better time than to talk about the word humanity or rediscovering humanity, as you said. So just a little more on that topic of what we're up to here. By background, you kindly mentioned 360 Nation. You talked about our Good Works 360. Let me just say, everything we do at 360 Nation, we've been around about 12 years. Everything we do for good, not for profit. And I'm blessed to be able to say that. So we literally use our time, our talent, and our treasure to amplify the visibility of anything and everything that fits under that Rediscover Humanity umbrella, which, as we all know, is a pretty broad umbrella. So there's never been a profit motive. We don't take advertising. We don't charge for anything. And again, we're blessed to be able to do that. So kind of trolling along these 12 years that we've been around, we've been approached, I cannot tell you how many times, with pitches from people that look at our audience and say, wow, you've got like 3 or 4 million visitors a year on your website. We sure would like to work with you. Now, naturally, they all have profit motives. And we've always resisted that for obvious reasons. That's not part of our how we operate. But we finally blinked about 2 months ago. Why? Because we were approached by a longtime friend of mine to be co-authors of a very special book entirely focused on the homeless population around the world, not just in the USA. Now, I'm not here to promote a book, and particularly since Brenda is in the publishing business, but she's been gracious enough to allow me to talk about kind of the ethos and the inspiration and the humanity behind the book. So this isn't about selling a book. This is more about what we call educating the masses. So we blinked because not only did the topic of homelessness fit squarely under our umbrella, but because the book was going to be a for good versus for profit thing, just like what we do, which means if there's any losses, we'll cover them. If there's any excess over the cost, we'll take that surplus and we'll donate it to a homeless charity that's dedicated to the homeless people. So it was a perfect fit. And the other reason it was a perfect fit, there's a lot of books out there around the world about the challenges of homelessness, but most of them are scholarly books. They've got analysis, they've got theory, they've got opinions. But this was going to be a one-of-a-kind book, and this was something we weighed in on and said, look, we'll do this, but we don't want to publish statistics. We can share some if it makes sense, but we want to get the voices of the people that are actually on the street to contribute to this thing. So the end result is we're now in the middle of developing this thing. It's only a couple months down the road, but it's real people telling real stories. And what I mean by that, and we're calling it Unsheltered Voices from the Street to quickly frame what we're talking about. So we're after real people that are living on the street who maybe they've lived on the street in the past and they're willing to share their story. I mean, that's real wisdom. We're also talking to people that maybe they weren't homeless, but somebody in their family, their friends, maybe a business colleague or somebody they know used to be on the street, and they're willing to share their story. There's some other audiences we're talking to, but our sweet spot would be people that are on the street today, because who knows better than them the challenges. So today I just want to dig a little deeper on some of the challenges of homeless around the world, because I've been just in research overload now for the last couple of months, and I'm disappointed. I'm embarrassed in myself that I didn't know what I'm about to tell you. It's just been eye-opening. It's a wake-up call for me and for so many others. So even if this book wasn't being published or going down the track of being published, we would still be doing something about this in 360 Nations. So let me just start with a few questions. Now, since we really don't have a lot of interaction here, let's just call these rhetorical questions that I'd like you to think about for just a minute, because I've asked these of so many people in the last couple of months, which starts to frame the challenge. The first question is, what's your first thought when you see a homeless person? I want you to think about that. I'm going to come back to that a little later in terms of some of the common answers to that question or the common perceptions. And then the second question you want you to think about is, when you see a homeless person on the street, maybe it's on your normal walk to work or whatever you're doing, in the city, do you just walk on by? And if you do, why? Or if you stop, what do you do then? I just don't think you can appreciate the scale of the problem unless you experience it yourself. But most people behave the same way, which means most people will pass homeless people by. And the effect becomes what they say, cumulative. I mean, just take a moment to imagine if on a normal day for you, when none of your coworkers would look at you, your family all ignored you, and when you tried to speak to them, even strangers on the street went out of their way to avoid you. That's the feeling right there. Now imagine that happening every single day. After a while, the homeless people subjected to that kind of treatment, they begin to feel as if they're ghosts, or as many of them have said to me that I've been speaking with, they're invisible. So they're kind of excluded by the rest of the world. If they try to strike up a conversation, their words fall on deaf ears. Nobody wants to talk to them. So they're ignored, they're dehumanized. And once again, that word invisible keeps coming up. So what I want to do is cover what I'll call, in all my research, some of the most common myths. And I want to emphasize one more time, this is not about homeless in America. Sure, that's a piece of it, but we're determined to talk about homeless around the world and to talk to homeless people around the world. Number one myth that we bumped into, people are homeless by choice. The fact is, people are homeless for a lot of different reasons, a good number of which are beyond their control. They lost their job. Then they lost their housing because they lost their job. So guess what? They're on the street. They might be lucky enough to get into shelter. Another subsection would be women running away to escape domestic violence. It's amazing how many women are in that situation. One of the first stories going into her book is a lady that lives in Canada that literally went underground, as they call it. She went into a network to protect herself and her children from domestic violence. Now, she lived on the street for many, many months. She's come up on the other side, and she's going to tell her story. So there's a lot of reasons for being on the street, but rarely is it a choice. The second myth, most people experiencing homelessness are addicted to drugs or alcohol. That's not true. Our experiences, of course, there's a small segment that are, and that's why they went onto the street. But the largest segment of people that are alcoholic or drugs on the street, that happened after they got on the street. After they became homeless, it wasn't a cause, but they turned to alcohol or they turned to drugs. They're trying to dull their own emotions and the realities and the fears of living on the street. The third myth, people experiencing homeless need to just get a job. I can't tell you how many people I've heard say, if they would just got off the street and they're lazy, just get a job. The fact is, putting that in perspective a little bit, it's difficult. Why? Take for a moment, imagine if you were trying to get a job when you got no address to put on a resume, no phone number, no shower, no clean clothes, no transportation, or you've got a criminal past, or you got some kind of learning disability or a lack of education. So think of all those hurdles if you're going to go try to get a job. So it's not that they don't necessarily want to get a job, but they've got so many hurdles to jump over. The fourth myth is people experiencing homelessness are dangerous. The fact is, homelessness is always associated with drugs or alcohol, violence, and crime. And life on the street is dangerous for the homeless, but very few crimes statistically are committed by people who are homeless. It's more often it's against them. Myth number 5, people experiencing homelessness are lazy. I mentioned that earlier. The fact is, surviving on the street takes a whole lot of work. I've spoken to a homeless gentleman in Scotland last week that I'll talk to you more about in a little while. But they're sleep deprived, they're cold, they're wet, they're sick, their minds and hearts and bodies are exhausted, they don't have money, they spend all day basically searching for food and then a safe place to sleep. And I emphasize the word safe. And they're also trying, as you've probably seen, many homeless people, they have everything they own with them. It's either in a shopping cart or in a bag. They're constantly mindful of their surroundings. They're trying to protect everything they own. So it's not an easy life. It certainly isn't lazy. And then last myth, there's a lot more myths, but I tried to single out the top 6. Last one should resonate with everybody here. It's homelessness will never happen to you or me. The fact is, people that are out there and homeless never intended. As I said, it wasn't a choice. They didn't expect to become homeless. They never thought they'd be there. But they had solid job. They had houses. They had families. But at some point, something fell off, or the wheels fell off, as we say. So even people on sound financial footing, like probably the people on this call, are not immune to a series of unfortunate events that might take you onto the street. So who are the homeless? What's that common perception? When I said earlier, when I asked the question, what's the first thing that comes to mind? The word homeless comes up. The most common perception is that it's a middle-aged, grisly-looking, unshaven man, typically of color, maybe a few teeth missing. But why is that? Because that's the image that you'll see publicized by the media or in charity appeals to grab your attention. But that isn't the reality. Let me give you some thoughts on the reality in terms of the answer to the question, who are the homeless? And it's remarkable how similar the answer is around the world. Number 1, they're people just like you and me. Number 2, they're elderly, they're young adults. Amazing how many young people in the age of 20 to 30 fall into that category. And there's a big group of families with children. They're also employees of what we call in America big box companies who can't afford the market value of their rent near where they're working, so they live out of their car. They might be college students who are using the campus as a place to sleep and the gym to shower. They're senior citizens and older people, surprisingly enough, who just can't afford the housing, or because they had some major medical bills and they can't do both. They're veterans, people who have served your country, whatever country that is. They're women and children, once again, who may have been victimized by domestic abuse. They're moms and dads, they're grandparents, they're people with disabilities, they're member of faith communities who exist day to day on just that next meal. And most importantly, they're our neighbors. So when it comes to the book, what we're trying to do here, we're trying to what I call change the narrative right up front. And how are we doing that? We're not calling this book homeless or about the homeless. We did a lot of research and we came up with the name Unsheltered. Why? Because if I mention the word homeless to you folks, you get that negative vibe immediately. If I said unsheltered, you're going to kind of wonder what that means, but you're not going to immediately go down the negative path. We think it's more neutral. It casts a wider net beyond people that are just unhoused. It includes people whose nighttime residence is just unsuitable for human habitation, like people sleeping on a sidewalk, or maybe they're sleeping in their car, or it's an abandoned building or a park. So we're trying to change the impression from the moment we published the book. The book cover we talked about. Typically, you'd expect that grizzly old man, missing teeth on the cover. We said, no, it's not just men. It's not just people of color. There's women, there's children. So let's do something different. So the book cover is going to be hands that are folded, almost like you're praying, but you couldn't tell if it's a man or a woman. So we wanted to start out neutral with that. Anyhow, I've done a lot of work on the stats. Again, the book is not going to be about stats, but it was a wake-up call. Most of these stats I'm going to share with you, they're from 2022. That's the latest amount available. This may be surprising to you because, the U.S. is typically considered the leader on the world stage, but we've got one of the biggest homeless populations, even when compared to impoverished countries. I read recently on a single night, over 500,000 people were unsheltered in the USA. I looked at some stats a few months back. It was listing the top 25 countries on homeless. I figured, well, USA wouldn't even be on the list. They're number 3. So startling to hear that. Some more stats for you. 6 in 10 or 60% of the homeless in America were staying in sheltered locations. What does that mean? Emergency shelters, safe havens, housing, short-term housing. 40% were living on the street, back to those abandoned buildings or parks or benches. About 3 in 10 people experiencing homelessness, they did it with their children. They weren't just alone. They were on the street with their children. On a single night last year, 2022, more than 30,000 people under the age of 25 experienced homelessness. It's simply amazing at that young age. And those stats, they just go on. They just go on. A big one here, while the Black or African Americans represented only 13% of the U.S. population, they represented almost 40% of the people in shelters. And since I knew Brenda was from the UK, I did a little work on the UK to say, how does that compare just in this country? The last estimate I could come up with is about 227,000 people are experiencing the worst form of homelessness in the UK. What do I mean? That's called rough sleeping, which means you're just sleeping wherever you can sleep. You're in vans, you're in sheds, across England, Scotland, and Wales. And that number is now projected to go up to 300,000 in the UK this year because the cost of living crisis, rising rents, all those emergency measures that were in place because of the pandemic, they're falling away. And I stepped back and said, let's look at the world a minute. And I'm not going to go on and on with all these stats, but there's some big ones here. It's estimated that 1 billion people are homeless worldwide. The country with the highest rate would be percentage of homeless is Syria. 37.5% of their population living without a proper home. Nigeria is on the country with the biggest homeless population by numbers. They've got a homeless population of almost 25 million people, and they only that's out of 216 million citizens. It's a significant rate. Germany's got the highest number of homeless people in Europe. In Asia, the highest numbers in Pakistan. In South America, Colombia. These numbers just go on and on and on. Common threads in all those cases. A few months back, we decided we're not going to wait for a book. We're going to start publishing and amplifying these homeless numbers and the dilemma and the challenges by publishing through our website a lot of articles, a series of articles. We've now done 10 of them in the last 2 months. We think we can help change the narrative by starting to re-educate people like me and many of the people on the phone here or on the Zoom call here that may be unaware of some of the things I've already shared. I'm going to put a link for those that are on Zoom. I'll put a link in the chat stream. And this is just a link to where you can find those articles. Because again, we're not selling anything. This is us doing research and saying, here's what we've discovered, including those myths. about the homeless. So I'm going to stick this in the chat stream right now. Okay. Here we go. Back to the topic. I'm happy to take any questions that are out there because this is an open discussion, but let me just share my experience, my firsthand experience, along with my wife. We happened to be in Edinburgh, Scotland last week. And we're walking over a bridge, middle of the day, it's around lunchtime. And we saw a gentleman sitting on the side of the bridge, kind of under an overhang, a little bit of cover there, but not much. And unlike many homeless encounters, this guy just seemed a little bit different. He didn't have a sign asking for anything. He had a very small cup sitting in front of him. And I said to my wife, that's probably because of his low expectations. So we put some money in the cup. And rather than walk away, and maybe because I've been so sensitized to homeless, I did what I wouldn't normally do. I didn't just walk by. I walked up and asked him for his name. And I asked him if it was all right to take his picture. And what we were surprised by, his face lit up with this big smile. And he said to me, I just want to thank you for seeing me and talking to me. Because guess what? He's felt invisible. Yeah, the money was important, of course, that we put in the cup. It wasn't a lot. But what resonated with me is the fact that we saw him, which is something he's not used to me. So eye contact, asking his name, talking to him a little bit, he wasn't invisible more. Now, the sad part is, this is the kind of guy that I would have pulled up a chair and sat with him and said, let's just talk for a while, because I'd love to include your story. Like, how did you get here? What did you do before then? What's it like on the street? I wanted to get his voice. But then the skies opened up and the rains came and everyone, went running off. We went off the bridge. So did John. When the rain stopped, we came wandering back. We went right back to where what I call his special spot was on the street. And he was gone. We didn't forget him. My guess is he has another special spot somewhere else, maybe under another bridge. But it told us very quickly just how little it takes to make a difference for all the Johns out there, because all we did was speak with him. So what did that do? Well, we came back, and just yesterday, this is in the link to the articles, I said, we can ask people around the world to help us get stories. We can say, to Brenda or other people, would you mind talking to homeless as you encounter them? But a lot of people would naturally feel, well, that's not safe. And it probably isn't safe in some cases. So rather than just invite people to say, can you go talk to some homeless people? We said, we're going to share our experience with John. We're going to write an article, and then we're going to put together what we're calling the Unsheltered Interview Guide. And we've done that. It was just published yesterday. And it's somebody that says, Dennis, I like your idea, but I don't know how to do that. So we've now given everything from safety precautions to how you approach a homeless person to how you get their permission to everything you'd ever want and everything that we want to do. So again, not everybody's on the site, but I'm going to put a link to that because it just went out yesterday. And we actually got a response from somebody in Canada who said, we're going to use that guide because we do want to help, but we just didn't know how to help. And we've got some shelters in our area. And so we're not going to do it alone. We're going to use your guide and partner with the shelter, because those shelters, many of them, they know the homeless that you can approach and they know their stories. And frankly, they would love to get the story out because maybe that'll add some donations. So, Brenda, that's pretty much my overview. Again, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just trying to educate. I'm trying to share everything I've learned for the last couple of months. I actually spoke with a gentleman about 2 weeks ago. He was in America, and I was connected with him through a friend of mine. And he shared with me, I said, talk to me about a day in the life of a homeless person. How do you spend your day? And similar to what I said, I've got the whole dissertation, which I won't read to you, but he said the same thing. He said, I am always on the move. I'm either protecting what I've got, I'm hungry, it's raining, I'm looking for a place to sleep. And he said, this starts every day at around 5 a.m. So if you think I'm just hanging around, Some people, we do sit for a while, we do take donations, we have our favorite spots to interface with people who might throw some money in a thing, but most often we're on the move for God knows how many reasons. So I'll end with that one, Brenda.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I'm very moved, and the reason I'm very moved was because I was homeless.
Oh my.
And you know, everything that you've said is so I was homeless because of domestic violence, and it's not easy. And being homeless is not, as you said, you know, the stereotypical image that a lot of people get of the man or woman with missing teeth, dirty, unkempt, because they don't have access to maybe a shower on a daily basis. I actually started a charity for homeless people around period poverty called Helping Handbags. And funnily enough, people have been getting in touch with me just the last week or two, and I haven't heard anything for quite some time. So I really would love to be part of your project. It's given me an idea for my next, because every year we do a charitable book. We did one for the NHS. So a book for 2024, and 24 is a significant number for me, is going to be around homelessness.
Wonderful.
And so today, and this is why people need to come and listen to you. I think maybe Professor Jagdish and Andrea have something that they want to say. I know they've made a couple of comments in the chat. So I will maybe ask you one or two questions as well and continue this conversation. But either Professor Jagdish or Andrea, would you like to either say something to Dennis or ask him a question?
Thank you, Dennis, sir, for the wonderful project that you are having, and the way you have brought attention to this segment of homelessness. This is very essential, because we all talk about GDP numbers and percentages and all that, but we forget about them. And we always say, oh, we are 8 billion people like that, but not 8 billion are of the same status or state. No. So it's wonderful that you have brought this to attention. Sir, in addition to this project and book, we would like to know about your life story, how you came to this idea, and how you formed this 360 designation, and the challenges that you have faced so far.
Well, I'll tell you what, the first challenge we faced, and I have to give credit to John in Edinburgh, the homeless gentleman, for inspiring us to just soldier on, as they say here in the UK. The challenge was, you know, Brenda, you've put together compilation books. I've been part of one. You know, and typically go out to a lot of people that have stories to tell, like have been told in your books. We realized right up front, this is different. You know, you can go out to people you know, but how many homeless people do you know? And I'm saying we want homeless people to have their voice, not my voice, not Brenda's voice, not Jagdish's voice or Andrea's. We want their voices. So right off the bat, we said, wow, this is going to be different here. Now we've worked our way through it. You know, the interview guide, I'm going to go back to that, because last week when we were walking down the streets of Scotland, I was feeling the weight of what we're trying to do here, because, you know, we're a couple of months into, you know, we've got a couple of stories in the works, but we're trying to motivate people to go out and do something. That's hard. You can see the passion. You can see people agree with you, but how many people are going to step up and actually do something about it? That was our challenge. And I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And then we met John. And when I came back, I said, John is just what I needed. That was synchronicity, because if John can sit there and his face lights up just because I said, hi, John, my name's Dennis. And that wasn't about the money again. So if John can do that, he turned me around a little bit. And I came back and I said, we need to talk to more Johns, which leads us to that interview guide saying we can't presume that everybody knows how to do that. And I'm no expert in it. I just did the research. I talked to people in shelters. I talked to other people saying, if you talk to the homeless, what would you recommend? So great question, Jagdish. We got a long way to go, but there are so many Johns out there that can help us get through it.
Thank you, Professor Jagdish, as always. He's always got great questions, and I know later on your talk's going to be magnificent as well. Andrea, is you get any comment or question you'd like to ask Dennis?
Thank you, Brenda, and morning, Dennis. And that was a lovely talk you gave about what you do in the book. I know what it is like because I run a charity, and few projects in the charity is one's to do with the homeless. We provide food and clothing for homeless once a month. So so I do resonate with what you're saying. And I actually met someone and actually took him to give a talk about homelessness and as a volunteer. So he actually volunteers with us and gives a talk about volunteering. Even though you're homeless, you can still volunteer and get stuff done,
Yes.
inspire other people with your story. So yeah, I do know exactly what you mean by your story and your talk.
God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you for doing what you do with the homeless, Andrea. And if you have any stories through that you'd like to be told, do reach out to me.
I will, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's wonderful, Dennis. And I know I'd like to have another chat with you about this. I'd like to chat with you because I'd like to be involved in your project. And the same I would also extend. I know Andrea and we talked quite some time ago about working together around this. And actually, I think now, Andrea, is the time for action. I've actually got goosebumps. I'm actually very emotional in a way that's now fired me up yet again, you know, because I was very fired up. And we, you know, in 6 weeks, this is a few years ago, we brought 10,000 people together just through one Facebook post, and we did amazing things around the whole of the UK for women on the streets. It was, but then the following year we then included the men. So there's lots of things that we can do, and there's lots of people who will help you. But as you know, people come and people go. Andrea, you'll probably know this as well. When you run a charity or a non-for-profit or any of these things, people come, people go because they get busy. So it's about finding people who are like-minded, like everything we do, Dennis, you know. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I remember you talk. I would like to add something, Dennis, because homelessness, I can't go anywhere in the world without, you know, really feeling it when I see homeless people. And I was in America a couple of years ago, and we were in, I think it was LA. We were just outside LA. We were in this hotel, and then the next block down was a sea of tents for all homeless people, veterans, and there was a woman, an elderly woman, pushing her trolley, like what a lot of us Brits see about America on TV. She's got a shopping trolley with her world in it, and I had a couple of bananas in my hand, and I just went. She kind of looked at me, and I looked at her, and I smiled because I smile at everybody, and I went up to her, and I just started talking to her, and let me finish this story and I'll tell you what I think that will help people, is that she was happy, like you said, that I stopped to talk to her. And, you know, I said, was it okay? I asked for permission. And yes, and I said, would you like these bananas? I thought I can get more bananas anywhere, but she might not have food or whatever. It might be something. And she was so gracious at accepting those bananas. So in terms of what do you do when you go and speak to people? Well, number one, you treat them as equal and you're respectful. And when you treat people, no matter who they are, whether you're talking to a child, an elderly person, whoever, when you treat them as an equal and you go on to their level, because another time in the UK, I spoke to a young guy who was on the street and I crouched down to his level. And oh my God, the conversation that ensued. So be respectful. Just treat them like any other person and speak from your heart. And for me, I find that they will engage in conversation with you. And that's what I would say to anybody about speaking to anyone in the world. Be respectful.
Brenda, it is as simple as that. You know, you can read our interview guide with the sample questions and everything else, but it all starts with what you just said. Get down, sit next to them, look them in the eye, get their name, introduce yourself like you would with anybody else. That by doing those three things, you've already neutralized that feeling of invisibility. And it's amazing. Again, I regret that the rains came, because I would have sat there with John for an hour and talked to him, because I wanted to get his story out. But there will be more Johns out there. But now I've got the inspiration and the confidence that I can do it. I hope more people join us.
And let me just share one other little story, what I find about myself. And this is experience, because when you've got that kind of spirit, people see it. And no matter where I go in the world, I have two types of people that I attract: children and homeless people. Homeless people come up and talk to me. I was in Birmingham, and I was standing waiting on someone, and I had about 5 different homeless people come up and start talking to me. They didn't all ask for money or anything. They just spoke to me. So the energy that you give out will also help you help other people by just smiling and saying hello.
Yep.
Dennis, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Jagdish. Thank you, Andrea, for being here today. Everybody else who's going to be watching these summit sessions, I just know, please reach out. Dennis, when we put all this out, we will put all your details so people can reach out to you. And please reach out to me if I can help you in any way with your project. Please do. I don't mind sharing any stories or anything like that. My own story, if that's something that you want to hear about, being homeless with 4 children, having nowhere to live, then please, I'm more than happy. Professor Jagdish, I'm sure Andrea will reach out to you too. Please reach out to Dennis as part of the 360 Degree Nation. As authors of BBP, I have invited them to do that, Dennis. So I will just keep reminding them to do that, because you are such a generous human being, a kind soul, and an absolute privilege to know and, you know, be a part of the work that we mutually support each other's work. So thank you very much. So watch out at 10 o'clock. Oh, no, not 10 o'clock, sorry. 11 o'clock. We will have another great speaker for you, and that will be the wonderful Colin Tansley. He's coming to speak about, he doesn't sell cupcakes. So I wonder what that's all about as well. So until the next time, this is Brenda saying, be brilliant. Much love. And toodle pip. And don't forget to share your story.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.